A 1-1 draw at Morecambe at the weekend left us feeling a little bit not wise as the Stags' hunt for a striker continues. But for the second Thursday in a row, will Nigel Clough deliver us some news during the live show? And will it be the birthday present which I desperately want? What? You could only offer me a striker, not £1 million? That'll do. As always, come and have your say on your team as we reflect on the trip to Morecambe, the postponement at home to Forest Green Rovers, have a little rant about a certain section of supporters, and see if Alan and Clive can finish eating their cake before the end of this intro. This is the show for the fans, by the fans. This is the Mansfield Matters Podcast. It's Morecambe and not wise. Hello, one and all, and welcome to the Mansfield Matters Podcast, the show for the fans, by the fans. Why? Because Mansfield always matters. As always, come and have your say on your team in the live feed comments. Any questions, any comments about all things Mansfield Town, or if you just want to wish me a happy birthday, you can do that as well. Right, let's get this party started, shall we? And say hello and good evening to my friends to my left. The two men who have brought birthday gifts and birthday cards and who are sat devouring cake and who desperately don't want me to throw to them because behind those smiles they are secretly finishing off the last remnants of cake. But tough, that's the way the show goes. We're going to say hello and good evening to them right now, and I'm going to sneak this headphone in to make sure that the audio is working all right. Hello and good evening, Mr. Alan Wilson.
Good evening, Craig. Good evening, Clive. Good evening, everybody.
And hello, Mr. Clive Parkin.
Hey, up my birthday, Duck.
I'm just getting the last bit of you. There's always a delay when you're listening in headphones, so I'm listening to what you said 10 seconds ago. I'm going to take that out of my ear now before it gets confusing because it's all working. Hello, everybody. Shall we get on with the show? Yes, ditch those headphones on the floor. I don't get any more professional with age. That's certainly one thing. That's one thing for sure. Right, where shall we start, Clive? Shall we delve straight in at Morecambe and not wise? Because after the defeat the previous week, there was one thing on our mind, and that was getting back to winning ways. And we left Morecambe feeling a little bit dejected, and that was not just knackered. And that was not just because you took us on a 14,000-mile hike from where I parked the car to the Morecambe seafront, was it?
I'm pretty sure, Craig, that they've moved that statue since last time I went. All my legs have got shorter. It was a good day out. We got a bit of wind in our faces. We managed to see Eric, and we enjoyed the walk. I think it was all right. And actually, you know, it's the first time I've been to Morecambe's ground, so it was good for me.
Yeah, it was. It was a nice little visit, but in the end, Alan, the 1-1 result that we sort of came away with was one of those which just sort of left you thinking, oh, why have we not picked up 3 points there? It's one of those where when you come to the end of the season and you fall short by 2 points or whatever, I'm not saying that this will be the game, but it's that type of result which just leaves you thinking, oh, it's frustrating taste.
Cracking goal by Cargill, and then it was just the obligatory, or seems to be obligatory, mistake again. They just went through us like butter. You know, it was down the right-hand side, weren't it? Where the barrier was supposed to be there, he was just inside. Somebody was trying to track him back, just didn't work right, and it went, they scored an easy goal, which could have been prevented quite easily.
Yeah, it could have been prevented, Clive, quite easily. But again, it's one of those things where you think, are the questions deeper than the mistakes? And I'm sure we'll talk about it more as the hour or so goes on. And that is, of course, the missing firepower.
Yeah, if we're being honest, we didn't deserve to win. The team that played against Morecambe was nowhere near as good as the team that had been playing 6 weeks ago. And had we put our team out of 6 weeks ago, we'd have taken them to town. The goal was, you're going to get goals like that, and we have to score one more at the other end. But we didn't make an awful lot in that game. I take Alan's point; it was a really good and well constructed goal, but we ought to have gone. You know, we ought to have put ourselves out of sight, and we weren't on the day good enough to do that.
that theme, Alan, of not creating enough chances is starting to get a little bit bigger and wide and wider now, isn't it?
Yeah, because I think it was the same again, in my opinion. I thought when I watched it back, it looked as though one or two of them were tired again, or they seemed to get, they seemed to be rather leggy. Now, whether it's because the opposition's coming at us quicker, and we're not able to deal with it at that time, but there were just one or two that seemed to be rather leggy, and I think we just need to maybe freshen it up a little.
Yeah, I certainly think we do need to look at doing that. And I guess the argument's going to come back round, Clive, of the Will Swan debate's going to rear its head again, isn't it?
Yeah, we look toothless up front, and I'm certainly not one of those people that's going to join in with some of the vocal idiots about our friend Lucas Aikins, because Lucas works his socks off. He doesn't provide to some of our fans what they think he should. And he was a bit on a lost cause at Morecambe. He was very much on his own. And Faz Rawson dealt with him very, very well. And he got two big fullbacks at the side of him. Any approach in the normal sense of attacking was being really well contained by their defence. And you've got to give them credit for that. But we lacked pace up front. We've lacked pace up front for a while. And certainly having lost the services now, I'm guessing forever, of Mr. Oates, I think we've got to recruit.
I think, like Paul in the comments says, Alan, very quiet on the transfer front still. I know that, historically with Nigel Clough and transfers, we do sort of keep it on the down low, and we don't sort of be proactive in what we're doing. But one thing that we are desperately seeking now is a little bit more of an update from the Stags, because with Rhys Oates missing for the rest of the season, we do need to bring a striker in. I think it's clear that, like we said last week, without repeating the same conversation again, Will Swan's not going to cut the gravy, to turn another phrase, this season. We've still got James Gale missing. We can't really rely too much on Makeel Abdullah, because he's still a young player who's, as the business end of the season comes in, he's not got that experience that we require of him. We have to invest, and if we want to be serious about our competitors, we've got to do it now. And like I said last week, it's not about keeping up with the Joneses, but you look at the business Barrow did with bringing Cole Stockton in, and you think we need to be matching that, because it's not now about keeping up with the Joneses. It's now about, it's a necessity to actually do it.
Well, when Nigel said in his last interview, or the last one I heard, that they were still waiting for the other team to come back, for their number one target. If that's not the case now, I'm sure he's got other irons in the fire. But, it needs to be sooner rather than later, I think. But I'd still go back to, I don't think Will Swan's season is over. I think if given a chance, I think it could come good. I really do.
Yeah, it's certainly it certainly is one of those things where, given the chance, he can come good. But I don't know. I think if there was ever an opportunity to play him, Clive, and to give him said chance, surely it was Saturday at Morecambe, wasn't it?
Absolutely. In not playing him, it said two things. One, the manager's not happy with him, and two, the manager wasn't ambitious enough on the day to put a stronger forward line in. Now, it's not for me to criticise the manager, because by and large we've scored a lot of goals without having forwards, and presumably he thought we could get the goals we needed from midfield and elsewhere, and it proved to be the case that a defender scored our goal. So, but I'd like to see a bit more up front, and certainly now that Oates is out of the picture for a while, we are devoid of pace. Midfield looked tired. I think you've said that. Why, I don't know. In many respects, we'll come on to Tuesday's postponement shortly, but that's done us no harm at all, because I think the players need a little bit of recovery time. But and one thing's for sure, if we played on Tuesday night, there's been at least 6 to 8 weeks injury. So I think we come away with a point, and I have to say, I see that as a good thing.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Sorry, Craig, I would agree with that, Clive, because, like Nigel said all along, we've said all along, if you don't win, you certainly don't lose. We've only lost twice this season, and it can only bode well for the rest of the season. You just don't lose. And those points will make prizes at the end of the season.
Yeah, completely agree. Not losing the game was the biggest thing on Saturday, because I do feel that Mansfield Town of old would do that. We still have only lost 2 games all season, and that's a very good thing coming towards the business end of January. I also agree on Clive's point about the postponement on Tuesday being the best thing that could have happened to us. I like having, I don't know why, but psychologically I actually like having a few banked games in hand towards the end of the season, because it does make, especially when you're on a bit of a run, it does get people looking over your shoulder. We'll talk more about that and later on, though. Let's go to a few more comments. How old, Craig says Tracy in the comments. How old do you think? Let's play that game, shall we? How old do you think?
17, Craig.
Thank you, Clive. You can stay. Lots of other, yeah. Lots of plus that. Lots of other birthday wishes coming in. Really appreciate those. Ross says Will Swan doesn't get the match time he deserves. Simon, evening everyone. Happy birthday, Craig. Pitch inspection planned for 10:30. Do you think our game will be played? I've just had a quick look through Twitter and social media. I didn't see any posts suggesting that there'd be a pitch inspection at 10:30, so I'm not entirely sure where that has that information has come from. But yet again, weather-wise, over the sort of next few days, it is going to be cold. The pitch isn't going to get any better. And do you know what? As much as I want to see us play on Saturday afternoon against the Sutton side that are struggling, I also don't think that a missed Saturday would be too much of an inconvenience. I'm probably in the minority of that, Clive, but I do think we need a little bit of time to allow us to go and watch other players, maybe get other players in. I'd rather have 2 games in hand with a striker having been brought in January than rushing one and getting players injured for various other reasons and not having the availability, if that makes any sort of sense.
There's some logic in what you say. I mean, on the other side of the equation, we're all desperate to watch our team play. And the people that were disappointed on Tuesday night included me. But the disappointment of some fans was palpably inappropriate. I'll pick up on that. The thing is, they had a go at the club and pointed out that our ground staff were inadequate and described our club as tin pot. If they genuinely believe that, they should piss off somewhere else. We have a pitch which isn't good enough, in my opinion. I don't think you can blame the weather on our ground staff, and he can only work with the resources the club gives him. And compared to a lot of clubs in our league and elsewhere, we don't spend half as much on the infrastructure that other clubs do.
Yeah, let's stay on the pitch topic for a couple of minutes. It really frustrates me every time I see pitch inspection on our social media or game off, because I know what's coming in the comments, and it is completely unfair. The ground staff do a tremendous job. Mez has worked at the club for years and upon years upon years. He is as much of a club legend as the man who sat next to me here. He breathed, he's within that lifeblood of Mansfield Town FC, working with his hands tied behind his back. He's more passionate than anyone about what he does and getting games on. And for fans to tag him in social media, it's the same with footballers really, but for fans to tag him or his family in and things like that on social media and hurl abuse, that is completely and utterly wrong. It's clear that we've got some form of issue with our pitch, but that's not his doing. He does the best of what he can do with the availability that he's got to him. But you've got to go back and you've got to look historically about why those problems arise. And that is the former owner who has built the ground wrong and who has done a cheap job in point up and has not given us the best fighting chance. It is what it is. And in actual fact, it's not the end of the world, because it's not just that which is taken into consideration when a postponement is made. There are lots of other factors involved. The pitch itself, it probably wasn't, but it could have been playable. And hear me out for a minute on this one. There's more than that factor that comes in. It was bitterly cold on Tuesday night, and you were looking at 6,000 plus supporters who were coming out and sitting in that cold. You're looking at a squad of 16 players plus management staff and also performing in those cold temperatures and putting risk to themselves with injuries and things like that. You're looking at health and safety around the ground. If it rains in between that period, it could cause ice because of the temperature and it freezing and things like that. There are lots of other factors which are taken into consideration when a game gets postponed, and for supporters to not understand that and just go ground staff are shit or whatever on social media, it's moronic behaviour and it's unprecedented. And I just want to say on this podcast that for every single comment that you see slagging off the ground staff or slagging off the state of our pitch, etc., there are 20 times more, Alan Wilson, that are in support of them and that are genuinely thankful for the job which Mez and his team do.
I'm going to say, you've got Robbie Sprigg, you've got Mez, you've got Scott, you've got the rest of the ground staff. I don't know all of the names, but they do a fantastic job with, with what they've got to deal with. You can't help the weather, and it's just one of those things. You'll get people, okay, everybody can have their own opinion, and, but to slate him on the social media, I'm sure whether he's seen it or whether he hasn't, I suppose he has seen it, knowing Maz. I said, but I think he'll just shrug it off because he knows the truth and he knows how, the 100% of the supporters feel that's behind him. You get odd one or two any day. They've called me before. It's just one of them.
How dare they? Tell me who they are and we'll go round to their house.
It's just one of those things, you know what I mean? It's not, I'm not for everybody. Mez isn't for everybody. But the thing is, he does the best of what he's got available to him. And hats off to him because, he'll win more times than the losers.
I think it's worth reminding people as well. He doesn't just look after the pitch at the one call.
No.
But he looks after the RH Academy as well.
And I'll tell you, sorry to cut in there, but I'll tell you this. If you gave Nigel Clough the choice of which pitch he wanted to be thawed out and to be workable out of the two, he's going to say the RH every single time so he can train and prepare for the game. Fact.
Well, the RH as well doesn't have the disadvantage of a big stand looming over it, preventing the sun reaching it. And there's nothing anybody can do about that, short of changing or moving grounds. So I think we have to put up with it. I think the criticism that is probably reasonable is there's got to be better mechanical ways of dealing with the moisture and the water retention down the Ian Greaves side of the pitch, because that's certainly got worse this year than it has in previous years. But that's a technical thing. On the day, if it rains or it snows or it freezes, nothing anybody can do about that.
Yeah, and it did drop considerably that Tuesday as well, which you can't always take into consideration. These are other factors as well, costs of wages and all of that stuff. The club will have done their best that they could to get that game on because of the things and things that they have to pay. But also, let's just take this into context for just a second. I'm going to take you back to 2 years ago today when we went all the way down to Forest Green Rovers on a Tuesday night, all the way to Nailsworth, driving through the back country lanes in pitch black to a horrible little ground which doesn't have anywhere for away supporters to be, only to come out and to not see the players come out, for the game to play some 8 minutes before 4 minutes.
I thought it was 6.
All right, you're ruining it, guys. You're ruining it. For the game to play and for the game to play some form of questionable amount of minutes before the referee in his infinite wisdom decided to call it off, abandon it, and send us all the way back home, only for us to have to go back 4 or 5 weeks later.
We were on top in those minutes, though, Craig.
Were we? You must have been able to see through the fog better than me because I couldn't see a fucking thing. But anyway, shall we move swiftly on? Let's go to some of your guys' comments. All I'm saying is what goes around in terms of Forest Green Rovers comes around.
You've also got to remember there's travelling club coming to you.
Yeah.
You've got to give them time. There's the team and its coach and all the staff.
Referee.
And there's, the 20 fans that they would have brought. They need to be taken care of. We wouldn't thank them not to give us the same consideration if we were travelling down there. So,
Which they didn't.
And I think with pitch inspection,
Twice.
You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll also remind you when we went to Forest Green, played 45 minutes when we shouldn't have played 45 minutes, and it absolutely wazzed it down, and the game wasn't playable. So what goes around Forest Green Rovers comes around. Paul in the comments says it comes from the 70-odd groundkeepers in the stand. Are they the 70 odd that also question the substitution? I think they probably are.
And they're the best referees in
They
the
are
world.
Absolutely. Simon says it's been an exceptionally wet autumn/winter. The Wrexham match went ahead and damaged the pitch, which will take until the spring to recover. Yeah, absolutely. And that had to sort of go ahead as well, because I think that one was on. That was a TV game,
Yeah,
wasn't
that
it,
was
for
a TV,
Welsh
weren't
TV?
it?
Yeah. Agreed, says Mark. Mez works his absolute ball locks off. Week in, week out. We've a great team to do loads of the work off the pitch and get games on. I was gutted, says Ross. I couldn't go, but it happens. Never blame the ground staff. Do blame the refs. But an old saying can only beep with the beep you've got. Yeah, I wasn't going to read that, Ross, but everyone knew what I was trying to say. Keeley says, spot on, Craig. Well said. I would love to see half of the moaners do better. Love to see them get their boots on as well, because half of them think they're fabulous footballers or managers. Yeah, lots of supporters coming in, and just to have a little bit of comic relief as well. What's the latest on Lee Gregory? Shall we move on? We'll scroll back to some more of those comments later, because there was one up here that I wanted to pick on. Not pick on, but pick up on, should I say, about Lucas Akins, which is brought to us by Aidan. I think a first-time commenter tonight. I've not seen the name pop up before. If I have, apologies. And if you're new to us, welcome. Here's some cake. Alan will eat it on your behalf. Glad you guys brought up Akins, top man and top player. People just think centre forwards are there to score goals, but forget exactly what Lucas is there to do. I have to agree. I mean, I hold my hands up. I was critical of him after Saturday's game, Alan. But the reason for that is that any centre forward that makes Farron Rawson look half decent is not good enough. But his general all-round game is absolutely there. And I think it has to be said that it's a partnerships thing. One player can't do everything. Lucas Akins' his game is top when he has players like Reece Oates around him to fill the extra spaces and fill in the missing pieces. And I think with Reece Oates missing, it's not just a loss because of what Reece Oates does for the team, but it's also a loss for what Reece Oates does for the likes of Lucas Akins in creating those openings and the ways that he can play.
And when you've got, when you've had Akins and Oates together for, few 5, 6 games, it makes a big difference. And yeah, that's where I keep harping on about it. But that's where, if he's given a chance, Swan could do the same job. I'm not saying as fast as Oates, because he probably isn't, but he is skillful when needed. And it was only last year when if you'd got a 1-on-1 with Will Swan, you'd have put your mortgage on him putting it in the net. So he just doesn't become a bad player overnight. And I think give the lad a chance if he can be given a chance. And I also noticed actually Mr. Akins got 3 fouls on Saturday. I counted 3 where he doesn't, how his shirt's pulled and whatever, and it fits 3 players after the match. He actually got 3 fouls, which
that's 3 out
which,
of about 10, Alan.
I know, but it did surprise me. Actually, got the 3.
It's nice to see Farron Rawson still wanting to put a Mansfield shirt on, albeit Lucas Akins is. Let's stay with the topic of Reece Oates for just a second. Obviously, absolutely terrible news, Clive. He got a bit of an injury earlier on this season, and I have to say, before that injury, I thought he was getting back to his best. Now, I was absolutely gutted for him because he was the old Reece Oates that we know and love. He came back, and I didn't think that he'd be able to hit those heights again, but he did, and he was slowly starting to tick over. But you could just see at stop put when he pulled up, you knew that something was wrong. Obviously, ACL and all of that sort of stuff. Out for the rest of the season. He's out of contract in the summer with us as well. He's been a tremendous servant to the club. But the question comes from Jamie. Do you reckon we will sign Oates on again next season?
Are you asking me? Possibly. If it were up to me, not. Because I think he's become a bit of a medical liability. The lad is fairly fragile by all accounts. I mean, I'm no expert, but he's now had 3 fairly long-term injuries in one season. And the club can't carry that, And if I'm going to be critical of that, I love him to death because what he does well, he does really well. But he doesn't think before he acts sometimes. And I don't think he needed to go into the keeper the way he did at the time in the game he did it. And he came off worse. And it was all right, it's fluke involved. And I also let me say, he was entitled to go for that ball. I don't think it's one of those things the referee should be taking action against. But a thinking forward, say, should I at this stage risk myself in that environment? And I think it's that risk assessment bit that he doesn't do very well. He's collided with players, he's collided with himself, he's collided with trees that don't exist. And I think, you can take your hat off to his enthusiasm, but you've just got to question his wisdom at times.
Yeah, if you just coming on that point, Clive, if you take that at Reece Oates, it's not half the player he is.
He's not, and I think it's one of those things, isn't
In my
it, where
opinion.
he's without. So if you took that side of Reece Oates away, that's not his game. And I actually felt at the start of last season he struggled because we've played the wrong system for him. We've played the right system again for us, and he gives us that pace and gives us that outlet. It's a difficult one because with the type of injury that he's got, it is difficult to recover from, and it is a longer term thing. But we have seen with the Alfie Kilgore situation, which has happened in the week, we've given him an extended deal, even though he's been out injured and sort of been out of the main picture, if you like, from most fans' point of view. He's still highly regarded by the club. We'll talk Kilgore later on, but using the same scenario, Alan, with Reece Oates, personally, I would like to see him given another year with some protection in there over certain injuries and things like that, because I do think he's a dangerous player for us, and I do think he suits Nigel Clough really, really well. But on the flip side of the coin, football is ultimately a business, and can we really afford to give another contract to a striker who might not be fit again until October, November time, when realistically what we need to be doing now is buying a fully fit striker, one who can compete and who has experience at playing at League One level on a more consistent basis, which Reece Oates, correct me if I'm wrong, does not, because that's about building our future. What you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And I would not like to be John, Carolyn, Nigel, Simon Clough, whoever it is that's making that decision.
I would like to see him kept on, and I would also like to see him, put something in, like a clause in a contract or something, where you get to play when he gets fit again. He plays so many games, like they have done with Aidan Flynn. He played so many games, and that triggered where he's allowed to do. I don't know whether that's the same with Kilgore or not. They've probably just, looked at Kilgore and, how good he is. But I think the same, to a certain extent, of Reece Oates. I know he gets injured, and I understand what Clive said, but that's the player he is. I mean, how many times has he, won a lost cause? Like a throw in, a corner or whatever, and the crowd have been on the feet because it's so exciting to see. And I just think we need that sort of player and give him a chance. But that's only my opinion.
Marie says, I think they will. Clough said it earlier in the week, it's not fair to the player who's injured playing for the club to let them go. He was referring to extending Alfie Kilgore, but I can't see it being any different for Oates. It'd be interesting to see what people's opinions are, because I think he is a really, really key figure for us, and one of those players who does get people, bums off seats. He is a crowd pleaser. He is a good sort of he is a good player which does excite fans, but you have to sort of, I don't know, it's a footballing based decision, and I don't know, for what he brings to the club and the squad, I'd like to see him given a little bit of extra time, but it will all depend on the extent of that injury and things like that. I do think, Clive, the one thing that Nigel Clough will do is, regardless of whether there is a new contract given and signed, I do think the club will look after him in terms of, once his contract is up, with that sort of rehab and getting back to where he needs to be.
I think the club's record on that type of situation has been excellent, and I can't see that changing. And there will be some insurance in place, I would have thought, to cover some of the unexpected costs surrounding an injured player. But, he's got now until presumably the start of next season to get himself match fit. Maybe the decision to offer him a new contract can be held back until that becomes clearer. I don't know. As a player, I'd love to keep him in the squad, but only if he's going to be fit.
It possibly all depends as well, what league we're going to be in. That might have a effect on the thinking. Who knows?
Yeah, that's another possibility. But again, you'd hope that the
Yeah.
club were safeguarding for a League One term next year.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely would.
You'd be silly not to. Simon says sure they will keep him with contract targets. Mark says Kilgore was injury prone at Bristol Rovers, set a standard now, so we should give Oates one more season. I don't know whether this was in relation to Reece Oates or not, but I'll read it anyway. Thomas says just a bit easy to defend against in the last couple of games and no threat in behind. Easy for teams to then sit deep as many do against us this season. A lot of people talking about Akins in the comments as well. We'll go back through and read some more of those as well. But let's touch on this one from Craig Clive, who says cracking signing with Flint and Kilgore. What a defence next year in League One. Touchwood with Hewitt, Kilgore, Flint, Cargill, and McLaughlin. And on the back of that, Clive, extending Kilgore's contract, and we were talking about Oates being out of contract. We do have a lot of players that are out of contract in the summer. I'd quite like to, as much as I'd like to see us say have a new player holding the scarf, so to speak. I would also like to see contract extended for X, Y, and Z. There are a number of players that we do need to tie down and get our house in order.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that the powers that be have got that in mind. But it is an opportunity to allow some players who have not figured as much as we'd like to think they could have done to go. And there's an obligation in terms of the team structure to try, as always, to reduce the average age of the team, which means buying in, recruiting younger players. But I think, we were going to build our team around Kilgore this season, and and he got the curse of the player of the previous season thing, didn't he? Just like Elliot Hewitt did the season before. And no one can legislate for a snapped Achilles tendon. It's not his record before that may well be that of a little bit of injury proneness, but there's no way that a snapped Achilles tendon has anything to do with what's gone before. And it's a shame because I thought he was going to be the backbone of our team. We've been very fortunate in that we've been able to work with Flint, and we've had the lad from Leicester that came in at the right time. But now he's been allowed to move forward from the back line, and he's developed really well, I thought. So when we get our players back, we're awash with good defensive players.
Yeah, we are. And I think the only area that we are light on, it comes back to the same conversation, Alan, though, is that forward area. Nigel Clough, I don't know whether he thinks that we are, though, because I've seen some of his comments in the press this week. I'm going to get them up on my phone, actually, whilst you give your thoughts on that so we can see exactly what Nigel Clough said.
I just think, he knows what he's doing. You've got to trust him. And like we said before, depending on who it is that he wants to bring in, the so-called number one target that Nigel keeps on about, if the club aren't willing to let him go, or they're not letting him go because of another player, at the other end, if they get signed that player, then number one target can talk to Mansfield. There are two other clubs, I do believe, in for this other number one target as well. So he might have to have irons in other fires, which I'm sure he will have done.
Well, let's go through the latest that we have on the striker situation, whilst I allow you guys to have a little nibble on a bit of cake or a biscuit or a little drink. And this is from the 15th of January, so a couple of days ago. Where manager Nigel Clough provided an update on the club's search for a striker in the January window. This is what's written on mansfieldtown.net. Do go and check out the full interview, of course, on iFollow. The boss previously stated that the Stags had identified a number one target and made a loan inquiry to the player's current club, so it would be a loan deal rather than a permanent transfer. Speaking in a news conference ahead of the game to Forest Green, Nigel said, "We're still making inquiries. There's still the main one that we're waiting for a definitive answer on. That's the problem. At some point, we'll have to move on from that number one target, but at the moment, we're still pursuing it. There are a few clubs in for the player, and it's the other club making the decisions on whether they want him to go. Just one striker will be enough, a good one. We've got 19-20 games left. I think if it was any more than that, if we were looking at 30 games left, then we would need a little bit more. With Lucas Akins, with Swanee, if we can get one in, then we also have Davies Keeler Dunn to go up there, as well as Jordan Bowery, who can do it as well. I think we're okay with one. If two came up, then we'd certainly look at it. One very good one is what we need. And of course, he was speaking after the Reece Oates injury diagnosis as well. So he was obviously counting Oates out of that specific equation. So he's basically saying, Alan, that he wants just one good striker, one good striker, but you've got to define what good is and how they fit into the team. But also you've got to look at what point do you move on, because January, the transfer window goes round so quick. If you're looking at 2 or 3 players in the summer, it's a lot easier because it's such a wider window. But everybody's trying to vie for one player. What happens if that number 2 target gets taken by somebody else while you're waiting for a definitive answer on number 1 target? It's such a difficult market, a difficult time.
I just think that it must look reasonably positive, because otherwise it wouldn't have kept it on for so long. I would have thought, he's got irons in the fire, like he said, like other targets, what is, what's his name, Simon Clough has, found out for him. But I think it must be pretty confident to keep it going this long, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's certainly a difficult one. Someone in the comments, Clive, has said, need a right back as well to release Bowery to be an option up front. And obviously with Callum Johnson injured at the moment, I can't quite remember what the latest is on him. 10 weeks, was it? So you're looking really 10 weeks. You're looking.
It's the season.
End of March.
Yeah, end of March. You're not going to get him back for many games, are you? So do we need to bring a right back in to secure that area and a little bit of cover there as well? Or do you look at the likes of Elliot Hewitt could potentially be coming back? You've got George Williams who can play in there. Aaron Lewis can play there. Lewis Brunt can play there if required. You have got a number of options in that area to potentially not bring one in. But do you bring one in if you want to then move Bowery into the striker category? Or do you just do what we've done all season long and it is what it is? And Jordan Bowery is Jordan Bowery.
Jordan Bowery's had a great season. And
Player of the season.
And he does tremendously well wherever they place him. I don't think we do need a defender. It'd be nice to have one, but I don't think it's an absolute necessity, whereas I do think some more striking options are essential. I feel a bit disappointed with the relationship between us and our feeder club, Burton Albion. I feel like Barrow's broke into our kitchen and stolen a bottle of pop off us. I thought Cole Stockton would have been a perfect loan fit at the club. But, obviously the club sees it differently.
You can't have all of the good things all at once, can you? So there you go. Right, plenty more still to talk about. Plenty more of your comments, questions and opinions still to come here on the Mansfield Matters podcast. Please do keep them coming in. We want to answer your comments, your questions, anything you want us to talk about that's Mansfield Town related, we will certainly do that. But first, time for a little break. Can either of these two wolf down a slice of cake in the next 15 seconds? We're about to find out. You're listening to the show for the fans, by the fans. This is the Mansfield Matters podcast. The answer, by the way, was a firm no. Clive, what did you say? So I'm not going to have any now.
Yes.
You refuse on
principle. I will not be force-fed.
You will not be force-fed. It's like a sweet instead. This Clive and everyone's present to me was a nice little jar of rhubarb and custard, are they?
Yeah.
Rhubarb and custard, one of my favourite boiled sweets they are. Anyway, shall we delve back into the comments for some more discussion topics? Also feel we need to get Reed back at the base. Wrong microphone fader, Craig. That's what happens when you don't look at what you're doing. Thomas says, also feel like we need to get Reed back at the base of the diamond and choose from Brunt/Cargill to partner Flint. Since Brunt came into the midfield, Reed has not been the same. Yeah, I absolutely agree that Reed's not been the same. I think there's been a few murmurings, Clive, that Reed's not quite had the performance standard that he had at the very start of the campaign. But I think it would be very harsh on Lewis Brunt to take him out of there, because I think ever since he's gone in there, he's been excellent.
Yeah, and he's got the talent and the confidence to drive forward, which is something that our midfield is struggling with at the moment. So I think he deserves to be kept in that position, and I will share some of the perceived criticism of Reid. I think he's gone backwards rather than forwards, and we have so much expectation of the lad, and I don't think he's quite getting there. Whether he's carrying a knock or whether he's just not fitting in around the squad formation, I'm not sure. But I think we deserve to see a bit more from him.
And the other thing with that as well is you look at Alan, the other players that are around him. We are so blessed with talent in there, but it is sort of 6 1 half does the other, because people want Stephen Quinn to play because of his passion, his energy, and things like that. But then when he plays, everyone's going, "Well, why is Ollie Clark not playing?" Cam was very vocal about it last week, but then Ollie Clark seems to pick up an injury and things like that. How would you? Like, I would not want to be Nigel Clough.
Well, I think, he's got an embarrassment of riches, hasn't he? In the midfield department, there's 10, possibly 12 players that he can pick on or choose at any one time. But, I think sometimes it's horses for courses with Nigel. Like he'll play Ollie in a role which he thinks he needs to play, like we did against Stockport. It was outstanding, that game. And, when Ollie does play, it seems to drive Mansfield on. I must admit, I liked two of my first players would be Clark and Maris on the playing field at all times. But, there's Lewis, what's the other chap from Newport?
Aaron Lewis.
Yeah, Aaron Lewis. They missed him when he wasn't, when he got injured and he was out for those few weeks. I think they missed him down the right-hand side. So, it's just horses for courses, I think. Who's best in training, who suits the game better, or when he's seen them, can get the shirt, I think.
And not one mention of Hiram Boateng there, which leads me nicely on to the next little point, Clive, which is who should be loaned out? Do you think we have the squad depth to do it? O'Toole, Gale, etc. Boateng would have been one of those names that are in there. Even though we've got this little slight bit of a knock, this slight bit of injury thing with Callum McDonald, who we've not talked about, Callum Johnson, potentially Ollie Clark, obviously Rhys Oates, etc., etc. I still think we've got the squad depth to ship a few of those players out. James Gale is one who needs to go out once he's back fit from his injury to go and get development experience. John Joe O'Toole is one player who, like Alan's been saying with Wilson, I actually think if he was given game time, I think he'd actually come back to thrive for us again. But again, he's probably not the right fit for Nigel Clough and how we are now, and it's finding a space for him in the midfield. I actually still think that we can afford to get one or two out of the door.
If someone was prepared to pay his wages, we should wave him goodbye, because he's not being utilised. I can't see him having a forward future at the club. So at the moment, he is presumably just a drain on our salary resource. He's probably one of the highest paid players we've got as well. And it just seems a mystery to me that since he signed his contract, we've seen very little of him. I know he's had an injury, but for whatever reason, he doesn't fit into the setup. And he's a luxury we don't need. Same as Boateng, he's a luxury we don't need at the moment. Gale, I agree completely with you, Craig. He needs to develop somewhere. And if an opportunity for him to go and play in the conference came up, he ought to do it.
Yeah, I think it's the same with Mikel Abdullah as well, Alan. He's got a terrific talent. He's got pace. He's got flair. He's got energy. He does bring something to our games and our play. But as the season goes on, he's not likely to get many influencing minutes or valuable minutes in League Two. We need to safeguard our future on that front as well, because we have made so many terrific strides to improve our academy, and it gets better and better and better year upon year upon year. We need to if ever there's a time to get them out and develop them and look to feed them in again next season, now is the time to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd probably agree. And, going back to the O'Toole business, can JJ play right back?
Yes, JJ. He will play anywhere.
I just thought that was all, If JJ can play right back and is fit, put Barry up front.
He won't want to. I think O'Toole would rather play up front himself, wouldn't he? But
I remember when we recruited O'Toole, we had a desperate need of somebody in the back four.
Yeah.
And he did it well, but he kept saying, I actually prefer to play in front of the back four.
Yeah.
And he's never really had the chance to do that.
Yeah, I remember him saying in an interview.
Only at Northampton.
Yeah,
when he was immense.
He's not been the player since
incredible that night.
Since he had his haircut, he's not been the player he was.
No, well, since it's not his haircut, it's growing it back.
Yeah,
when he looked like a thug, he was fine. Now he looks like again. He's yeah. He's not playing, but there you go. Plenty of comments coming in actually about Barry and Lewis playing together. I know that at the start of the season, Johnson and Lewis had a good partnership. I don't quite know why Aaron Lewis has not been in the starting lineup of late. I'd actually prefer him over Lewis Reed. I'm going to be honest at the minute.
I'm going to say he got that injury, didn't he? Didn't he? Should I say? And he was coming back from that, But it's same as I said before. It's horses for courses. We don't see the training, do we? We don't see people, putting. Maybe they're not putting 100% in. Who knows? Nigel sees it all. It's all seen. He knows what's going off. And, it might be like for Sutton on Saturday. If it's played, I would love to see Swan given a chance because Sutton are there for a reason at the bottom. Let's try and, get him some confidence and get a goal out of him.
I think this is in relation to JJ. He said did have an injury and probably actually slowly bringing him back. Yeah, I think he got injured in one of the reserve team in one of the Central League games, didn't he?
First few minutes.
But again, is that age? Is out of contract in the summer? Is that of that age where it does take some people recover from injury in 2 minutes, some don't recover at all. It's such a strange game, and one of these days, I would love the club to be a little bit more. One thing I loved about the club a couple of years ago, they did a bit of a behind the scenes look. I think it was an outside YouTube sort of channel that actually went behind the scenes on transfer deadline day and looked at what happened. I'd love the club to do a little bit more stuff like that. They've got the capabilities to do it. Let's have a little bit more from the medical department. Let's have a dedicated show. Let's get them on. We'd be open for them to come and be on the podcast. I'd love to have an episode on here dedicated to medical and training regimes and find out the ins and outs. Let's educate our supporters on that, and let's be a clarity club who can do that, so we can understand why it is that such and such only plays 60 minutes, why this player performs better on Saturdays than on Tuesdays, etc., etc.
Say sometimes when you see the bench. And you think, oh, why is so-and-so not on there? And then at the end, in the interview, when Steve-O talks to Nigel or whoever it is who's talking to him, they'll ask the question, oh, well, such and such, it was ill, or it got flu, it didn't play, it didn't train yesterday. And, you find the reason, but you don't always know before kickoff, and that's where people sometimes get frustrated, when, oh, why isn't he in? But then you find out the real reason, and then obviously it was... there was no problem over it.
Paul has just said, get Nigel Clough on, let the fans ask him questions. I would love Nigel Clough to come on here. Like I say, 2 years ago, when I was doing the commentary and the journalism stuff, I loved talking to Nigel Clough, both on mic and off mic. We had some really good conversations. He is, other than Paul Cox, the nicest manager that I've ever dealt with. And I've dealt with some right arseholes, I can tell you that. David Ellsworth, I'm looking at you. And I don't know, I just think... I would love him to come on here and be open and clear and just sort of talk and do things like that. Whether or not that could happen, I really don't know whether or not that could happen. The fact is, this is a live medium. We are, we do this live every single week. Other people might do Twitter stuff or Instagram stuff or whatever. And the problem with it being live is... it's unregulated, so you guys right now can ask us any question whatsoever, and we can say something because we're in the fluency of a conversation which we've not thought out, and then that get taken out of context. For us, as fans, that is absolutely fine. I had to be a little bit more careful when I was doing the commentary thing, which is why we changed the style of the show a little bit. And for a manager to do that and come on in a public forum like a player, it is so difficult because if it's in a live environment, they have to be really clear and really claritable on what they were saying. But that said, and I know this is something you're passionate about, Clive, there is a requirement from football clubs to hold events I don't know whether it's twice a season with the manager or with someone as part of like EFL regulations. I would love the opportunity for it to be us that were able to do that, because, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, we're fans, so we can understand both sides of the coin. We can ask those questions and have conversations on a more fan-based level, rather than it being another differentiated version of a Monday morning press conference where questions are selected, occasionally vetoed, and it be planned. I think if it was fans asking the questions in a podcast style forum, maybe there'd be a little bit more clarity. I don't know. Maybe clarity is the wrong word, but a little bit more openness and a bit more of a one-to-one manager to fan feel about it, rather than being, here's your questions, here's your answers, here's a succinct 8 minutes, take from it what you will.
I can understand managers being nervous about that, because there's jeopardy, and if you can avoid jeopardy in your working day, you will do so. Having said that, my understanding is that there is a recommendation, if not an instruction, that clubs should have at least 2 fan interface events a year, and we haven't had them. And I see no enthusiasm from the club to do anything like that, and I think that's a shame. In fact, yeah, and I think some of the interviews that do take place with Nigel and others are a little bit careful. I think as a result they become fairly sterile, and I understand that. I would imagine if you were in control of the questions, you'd pick the ones you wanted to answer. It's a bit like the post office interrogating their own staff at the moment. You just don't do it, do you? So I think where we are is the club has a good fan base. It's grown. It's twice what it was 3 years ago. It deserves as much respect because it's there as can be mustered. And I don't think the club has done enough in terms of fan interface. And I'd like to see that restored fairly quickly.
Yeah, and to be honest, a few years ago when we started this podcast, we did ask the question. I understand sometimes that it doesn't always come off. We've spoken to a few people who are no longer work at the club now and things like that to try and make things happen. The difficulty is it is hard to arrange, and it is difficult to get it past. Another thing that I would love to do, and I've said it before on this podcast, I would love to have, because I know they watch it and they listen to it in Portugal sometimes, I'd love to have an episode at the end of the season where we sit down with John and Carolyn and just have a chat about being a fan and on and off the pitch, not going into like politics behind the club and all of that sort of stuff, but just to have a chat and have that openness. But the difficulty is there is so many layers of red tape that it's unlikely to happen. Ross concurs and says Clough is a really nice person. Met him a few months ago at a charity day along with a few of the players. He took the time to chat to us. Couldn't ask for a nicer manager. I bet he would pop on your show again. I would love for it to happen. Jeanette says transparent. That's exactly the word I was looking for, Mrs. Wilson. I knew I could count on you. Thank you very much for the lovely birthday card as well, by the way. And I will get Alan to read that for us later on, just to feed my own ego, because obviously that is what happens on this show. Also, again, there's where was it? There was a comment about other events as well. Can't quite see it, but again, these events do happen. There was one about ones that happened with like Hawkins, etc. A few months ago. I can't find where it's gone now. Oh no, it's there. I was hovering over it. Alan, are there? I can't quite read that. Are there any talks again with doing a few meeting discussions like the other season when it was with Garns, Hawkins, Perch? Really enjoyed that. Yeah, we went to that. It was a great night. Yeah. Again, I'd love to see something more like that, and I'd be more than happy to host it and to have it as part of the podcast. It'd be a great thing. Other podcasts, it has to be said, from other League Two clubs and League One clubs and Championship clubs, it happens with the blessing of the club.
I'm going to say, well, you never know. Ask the question. It might happen. I wouldn't imagine that John, obviously, if and when time permits, that John and Carolyn would probably do another one again, because they're always very interesting. When John and Carolyn do one. With just those two.
We're always open for conversation. Now, I'll say this, there's never been a better time to do it either, because at the end of this season, in a couple of months' time, as you'll all know, there is the Mansfield Museum's football exhibition, which runs throughout the month. Nick's going to be doing an event there with his shirts. Really looking forward to that. We're going to be doing 2 podcasts there. One of them will be the normal show, and the second one, we haven't got a guest for it yet. We're working on it. Will be a sort of guest style show like Legends Live and Stag Stories, which we've done in the past. We would love that actually to be, rather than a previous manager or previous player, why not make it a panel of current players and tie it in and things like that. We'd certainly love for that to happen. Before we finish up today and do podcast predictions, there's one final thing that I want to touch upon, Clive, and I know it's something which you know a little bit about as well, and that is, of course, the match day experience. We're constantly selling out tickets. The Notts County game is sold out, for example. I think we've basically sold out our initial allocation for the AFC Wimbledon trip. We've asked for some more tickets on that one. It is getting quite difficult now on match day to actually get through the crowds if you get there after a certain time. And our match day experience after sort of the summer months has never quite been a good one. But there is a lot of work going off at the club at the moment to improve said match day experience. In fact, I drove past the ground on the way to work this morning and there was a digger.
Yeah. Well, there's some effort being made to create more space and opportunity for pre-match hospitality at the ground. I mean, at the moment, if you want to have a beer or a burger outside the ground, you run the risk of getting wet through if it's raining. I know the Supporters Association recently sponsored a canopy outside the Sandy's bar, but it's still quite a small area. But I've seen the same work as you've picked up on. They've driven a road up past near the famous gates, up behind the training pitch, and there is some proper steps being constructed pretty much behind where the burger van tends to be at the moment. And I understand from sources at the club that there's going to be a large semi-permanent erection. A marquee.
Steady on. It's not that kind of show, is it?
I'm guessing it's going to be a similar structure to what was used for the awards evening. And it'll be semi-permanent because they'll have to put flooring in it and electric and all the rest of it because they're going to be selling drinks and things up there. And that will just give much more capacity for pre-game activity up there. That's a good move. Yeah. The fact that it's semi-permanent is also quite relieving to me because I'd like to think sooner or later we'll make better use of that land behind the ground. But in the short term, it's not being used for anything else, so why not? Yeah. But the ground itself is a big problem, isn't it? We can talk about this for 10 podcasts. It's not set up properly. It was never set up properly because the previous owner waltzed off with some of the resources that should have been invested in the ground, and we've ended up with 3/4 of a ground, which is facing the wrong way, and it buggers up the sun hitting the pitch. That's a fact. You can't do much about it. But what can be focused on at the moment is the ground is looking very, very tired. First glance, it looks great. You know, masses of blue and yellow seats and whatever. It's only when you get close to them you realise that there's an element of decrepitude creeping in, and it badly needs some TLC. And the fans don't get the most comfortable experience. I mean, I sit in the Ian Greaves lower, and you'd expect with that great big roof which stops the grass from growing, that would be protected from the rain. But oh no, doesn't work that way. And you know, the ground itself is limited to what it can provide. You've touched on it. We're now up to capacity for a lot of home games. We've got a little bit of an experiment going on against lesser supporter clubs like Forest Green Rovers and Sutton on Saturday, where 2 of the 5 bays in the North Stand are going to be carefully allocated to home fans as an experiment. But the big problem we have there is that the police and the ground safety people are petrified of having 2 lots of fans behind that stand. I don't know why they're so worried about it, but there you go. So there's a limit what we can do without major investment in the ground. And I'm not even going to touch on the usual subject because everybody's fed up of it now. But there is a future, but it needs an investment in the ground that I guess they'll only ever want to put in if we've moved into a division higher. Yeah. So maybe it's chicken and egg.
And stabilised in there as well. There's no point putting it in for a 1 season if we're going to come straight back
down. And the work that needs to be done can't be done in 1 season anyway.
Correct. Yeah, it's a much bigger building job. But I am glad to see them doing a little bit of work on all things match day hospitality and things, because trying to walk through that crowd at 2 o'clock is an absolute nightmare. Getting some of the footfall off of that little bit and up onto that essential dead space is great. I'd concur that that's probably something that they're doing with that. But again, this is only a little gripe. Why not say that they're doing it? Why not? Don't just pop it up and go, oh, here it is. Let us know that they're doing it. We'll create a bit of positive buzz, and everyone gets a little bit of positivity
I think
to
there is
it.
a trick in not talking about the better things that are taking place, because the fans pick up on the things that aren't positive. The club has a responsibility and the ability to counter that with positive news.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, that's almost all we've got time for. One little thing to do just in a minute. Lots of you sort of sending in your messages too about a potential live event and things like that. Contact the club. We're more than happy to facilitate it and to host it. We've got all the gear and things like that. We're all more than happy to have it at the club and get a bit of revenue in for the club, like we have done previously with Stag Stories and Legends Live. More than happy to do that with the club's backing and the club's blessing. There's a factor as to why we haven't done more events in the last couple of years or so, because it comes out of our pockets and it's not affordable. But if you want the club to do it, and if you want to see it, speaking up and sending suggestions to the club would be great. I'm sure you can find all the contact details on the club's website, mansfieldtown.net. Right, time for a very pointless game. So will they win, lose or draw? And what will be the score? It's the guessing game that brings you zero fame, but to be the best you must outguess the rest. So will they win, lose or draw? And what will be the score? In the League or Cup, you just make it up, because they're just works of fictions. It's podcast predictions. Will they win, lose or draw? As Clive rightly said, I don't think anyone, and Alan rightly said during that little intro there, I very much doubt anybody will have picked a 1-1 draw at Morecambe on Saturday. But here we are, facing one of the league's bottom sides this weekend in Sutton United. Obviously, new manager in town now as well, so they'll be eager to sort of impress and get 3 points on the board. But will they? They've been our bogey side in the past. We managed to banish that myth earlier in the season, Alan, just a few weeks ago. But what are you going to go for podcast predictions this Saturday as Sutton United come to town?
I'm going same as what I did for Forest Green Rovers. Mansfield Town 3, Sutton United 0, and Brunt man of the match.
Clive.
I'm going to be confident to say we'll have a clean sheet, but I don't think we'll score 3 goals. So I'll go for 2-0, and I'm going to go for Keeler Dunn.
DKD on that one. I am going to go for a more... I've been outlandish with my predictions of late.
Yeah, 6-1 at Morecambe was a bit rich.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I got the one right.
Yeah.
I do think we'll keep a clean sheet. I agree with Alan. I'm going to go 3-0, and my man of the match is going to be... do you know what? Can always rely on him. Jordan Bowery is my man of the match. If you want to play along with podcast predictions, the link that you need is in the description. You must submit your guesses no later than 1 hour and 1 minute before kickoff on Saturday afternoon. And we'll bring you up to date with the January league table on next week's show. Right, many thanks for all of your birthday wishes, etc. today. Really appreciate those in the comments, and as ever, your comments, questions and opinions in the live feed. There's only one thing that I want for my birthday. We didn't get the striker, which I asked for at the start of the show, but this morning through the post, I did have a lovely card come through from Mr. Alan Wilson, and in it, as you can imagine, there was an Alan Wilson poem. It wasn't quite the Biscuit song, and I read it this morning, and it did bring a little tear to my eye. But you know what? There's only one thing better than reading the words of Alan Wilson, and that is hearing the words of Alan Wilson. So please, Mr. Wilson, will you make my birthday and announce the signing of a striker?
Yeah. Well, other than that, Craig is a quality commentator. He really is the cream. And to do something that he loved, I'm sure he fulfilled his dream. He knows a fair bit about football. His knowledge is extensive and
Debatable.
grand. And I'm sure talks a very good game when he's sat up in the West Stand. His commentaries were second to none. He certainly knows more than most. And he proves on Mansfield Matters, he makes an excellent host. As an avid Mansfield Town fan, he wears his heart on his sleeve, and like all other Stags fans, is starting to believe. So all the best on your birthday, Craig, when this birthday's been and gone, and you can celebrate in your new home whilst preparing for League One. Who knows what's round the corner? More commentating may come your way. But until that day arises, keep travelling with the SSA. You've built up quite a team of friends and colleagues on your podcast.
Our podcast!
And with it being 7 years on, you can see it's built to last.
Oh, thank you, mate. Really lovely words from Alan Wilson. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for writing that little ditty. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
You're a creep.
I know. Clive loves it. He loves it. I mean, I mean, yeah, I can't say anything wrong. I can't think of anything wrong with that, to be fair. I mean, it's no Biscuit song, but I like it. I was very touched to receive that from this morning. And, ego trip aside, it's my birthday. I'm allowed. It is one of those things where genuinely I am so thankful for all of the birthday messages and for all of you guys watching and listening every single week as well.
And
So
Nat's
please
cake is excellent, by the way.
I knew he'd dive in eventually. I knew he'd dive in eventually. There you go. So yeah, we will see you again hopefully next week. Hopefully with 3 points on the board. Make sure you keep an eye on all of our social media for when we're next going to be live. Final thoughts from Clive and Alan before I hit the jingle button, and that is, of course, weather-wise, we don't know what might happen. Striker-wise, we don't know what might happen. But there is one thing for sure, and that is getting a victory on Saturday against Sutton United, a team that have historically, Clive, been a little bit of a bogey side. It's one of those things that it'd lift the spirits a little bit because it's January, it's blue January, it's cold, it's horrible outside. No one's got any money because of the Christmas spending and things like that. So a win would put a smile back on people's faces, wouldn't it?
It would, and we need it because we need to maintain the momentum that we built up earlier on. But I've got one other thing to say, and that's to the fans in general. Don't bitch about the pitch.
Oh, I like it. It's almost beaten Alan's rhyme at the death. He's got a chance.
It's rather more succinct than that one.
Has he got a chance to rescue it? Let's find out.
I always like to try and finish with 3 words. And my 3 words for the end of this podcast is confidence is key.
What better way to end the words there of Alan Wilson? My thanks to him and to Clive Parkin as well. And of course to you guys for watching and for listening in the live feed. That is all we've got time for on tonight's show. My thanks to Alan Wilson, to Clive Parkin, and to you guys, of course, at home for watching and for listening. Make sure that you get involved with podcast predictions. The link that you need is in the description. Can the Stags get 3 points against Sutton United on Saturday, or will it be another postponement due to the weather? One thing's for sure, Morecambe has been and gone. Bitching on social media, like Clive says, is certainly not wise. So let's look forward and remember that Mansfield always matters. We'll see you next week. Keep an eye on our social media to find out when we're next going to be live. And let's hope that we're sitting here eating more cake with smiles on our faces with 3 more points on board. Until then, have a great week, have a great weekend, and we'll see you again soon. Good night. And just to finish off, before we go on tonight's show, Clive has just very much asked me the question of, why did you call tonight's show Morecambe not wise. Well, that was the best that I could come up with at the time, but I think at the very end, he's just pipped it by saying the show should have been called Bring Me Sunshine and a Striker. I'll leave it to Clive next week. Good night.